Let's get this rolling, man. Obviously, Mike, it's great to have you here. You're an NBA insider, and obviously, you have a lot of people that you speak with, and you have a lot of information in regards to what's happening around the league. But specifically for us, it's about the Warriors. The Warriors, we've been going through a show, bro. Like it's been unreal. And everybody in here, the fan base, we're kind of going through it together, and we're trying to help this godforsaken Warriors organization. They've been very incompetent in the things that the moves that they need to make, they haven't been making. The biggest problem right now with the Warriors is that defensively, they're severely compromised. Steve Kerr lost Mike Brown, and Kenny Atkinson had taken over as the primary assistant coach. But their defense has just broken apart since Mike Brown left. And this year, they desperately need a defensive assistant. And it doesn't look like that's something that they're going after. I don't think they realize that they need that defensive help from a coaching standpoint. So the next best option that the Warriors have is to try to get pieces that are going to make sense for the Warriors. Right now, the Warriors have a ton of redundancy issues, too many guards. They have Chris Paul on the roster, Corey Joseph on the roster. These guys don't really fit what the Warriors need to do from a defensive standpoint. And so they need to get bigger. They need to get bigger, and there are names to consider. Obviously, Shams has reported that everybody on the Warriors pretty much is available. I think it seems like less so now because of Kuminga and how well he's played, and Joe Laco's reluctance to let him go. At the same time, they need a closing caliber stretch power forward. So there are some names that we've talked about in here that the Warriors could possibly go after, and we're trying to figure out what are some viable options that the Warriors could actually go after? Which names are actually available, and which teams are kind of have some interest in what the Warriors have, whether that's Andrew Wiggins, whether that's Klay Thompson, which it seems like it's unlikely that he'll be moved. But the definitive names that we're looking to move off of are Chris Paul, Dario Saric, and Corey Joseph at the bare minimum. And the Warriors could either go for a center or a power forward that could come back and return to help their defensive situation. So, Michael, like in terms of just generally speaking, what are some of the key names that you've heard come up as a possible, trade option for the Warriors? There's Kuzma out there,
Kuzma
right?
there, right? There.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, I'll say this. I don't know if I fully had agreed with everything that was said. Like to me, Wiggins is the guy. Chris Paul, if they can find something for his contract that's worthwhile. But, I saw the stuff about them being open to everybody. But realistically, it's like, do they realistically think anybody is going to make something worthwhile for Klay, Draymond? Probably not. It's more about whether, if anything, they do something for Andrew Wiggins at this point. And I do think that they have some interest in him from around the league. It's just ultimately for them, it came down to originally with Kuminga, you touched on about him and Wiggins not being able to play together. But since Draymond's been back, they've been okay. Overall, I've reported on Hoopside they don't want to trade Kuminga. The only way that Kuminga's getting moved is if it's an all-star player that's coming back that they're going to have for the foreseeable future, or they get a boatload of draft picks that's probably an overpay. And I don't see that right now. They talked about Pascal Siakam, and, a lot of people thought, oh, well, Toronto's going to want Kuminga, and they didn't want him as much as some other players that were out there. That was a little bit overblown. And so, for the Warriors, I think he's staying. In terms of Chris Paul, most people right now are just viewing him as, well, he's kind of an expiring contract. It's not even so much as a rental, or it's not even, as much for next year. I do think the Warriors value him more than that, because if they decide to keep him through the deadline, his contract expires, you can bring him back on a smaller number. They do like what he's done with the second unit. As far as Wiggins goes, when Anthony and I were kind of hypothesizing teams, we looked at one was potentially this is not me reporting, So this is just an opinion. But the Houston Rockets have been looking to get a starting caliber upgrade, and they've got expiring contracts in Victor Oladipo and Jock Landale. Is that something that makes sense for them? And just for Wiggins, I think I saw Anthony Slater today talk about how it would be player for player. Potentially they could do without having to move anybody. I heard rumblings like 2 days ago that they were telling teams that that's possible, but I didn't know who it was for. He says it's for, player for player. I worked with Anthony. I love Anthony. I think he's very good at what he does. So I'll take him at his word for that. And he's a good Warriors insider specifically. So the only thing is I don't know yet who. I've been trying to track that down as far as what player specifically, if it's going to be a one-for-one kind of thing. But my thought then is, who are you giving up that's going to be equal or better than Wiggins if it's a one-for-one? And if you are, how much is, how many years are they going to have on their contract looking forward? So to me, still a lot of dominoes there that have to fall within the next week. But, you guys kind of touched on Klay Thompson a little bit. And, from by all indications from both sides, Golden State wants to bring him back and Klay wants to come back. Now, what's the number going to be? I don't know for sure yet. They're going to have to figure that out. But if both sides want to get it done, I would expect after the season they end up with a multi-year extension. Don't ask me if it's 2, 3, 4 years. Like, nobody's sure of that yet. But most people around the league think like he's going to end up staying there ultimately, like beyond this year. Where there's a will, there's a way. So I'm gonna mute myself real quick in case there's like static for everybody else, and then you guys talk, and I'll hop back.
Yeah. So, Michael, so again, a couple of names that the Warriors, from our standpoint, we feel like it'll really help the Warriors. One of them is Kuzma. So the Wizards.
I don't see that. They want just bluntly, like they want the equivalent. I reported on Hoopshot. They want the equivalent of like 2 firsts that are going to be potentially down the line that could end up being potential top 20 picks. So, I mean, if you're Golden State, can you give up future picks? I mean, I guess, but I don't think that's where they're looking right now. I wouldn't. Maybe from a fan perspective, or you guys maybe, but I haven't heard Golden State with Kuzma, at least as of now.
Really? So, I mean, that's disappointing. The Wizards, I feel like they have some pieces that obviously if they want to involve Kuzma, and they might need to involve a third team because of Chris Paul and the inability to bring him back there because they got him from the Wizards to begin with. But there's Gafford and Delon Wright along with Kuzma. There are some players of interest for the Warriors. But if there's no talks really going on in regards to that, that's a bummer. We've heard some different things about how Kuzma is somebody that the Warriors have a level of interest in. And if they feel like that's a piece that can, come back and really help the Warriors, why would they not do it? A pick like, bro, they're trying to gun for a 5th championship. This is immortal stuff that they're chasing after. Does the front office kind of not think in this kind? Do they not operate with this kind of mindset that like they have to go all in on this situation?
And as far as the Warriors go, they want to. It's a couple of things. One, they want to keep the core intact, the dynasty, if they can. 2, I'm pretty sure Steph would like that as well, ultimately, and the whole band would like to do that ultimately. The question is, what's the price going to be? Now, you look at Draymond's contract previously, and you got to ask yourself, well, is Klay going to get that or more? For them, that's where it kind of, what's the number going to be for Klay ultimately? I still think Klay can provide shooting. Defensively, he can guard up smaller guys, side-to-side agility. I mean, the guy's gone through a couple injuries. So, you have to take that into account defensively with him. But he's still a guy to want to bring back. He's still a valued guy. And for Klay, it's important in terms of legacy. He wants to ultimately, if he can, retire a Warrior. And, the legacy that he has here, it won't be matched anywhere else. If you're, looking at anything else in free agency, it's about money, fit, and role and things like that. He's still got a prominent role. So we'll have to see about that beyond, next year. And, I know you and I had talked about outside of this about Steve Kerr and kind of his future. And I saw a couple of I could see some comments on the side asking, so I might as well just like jump in on that. But with Steve Kerr, and talking with like Anthony Slater when we did the Hoops High podcast and talking with my sources, I mean, they still value him as a coach. And, as far as everything that just happened with Coach Decky, you and I are going to debate this. I know, but they've always valued him as more than like an X and O's guy. It's about his stabilizing force within the organization, how he handles the media. And, you saw it a little bit earlier when he touched on everything with Klay Thompson and how he had a conversation with him about where he is in his career now. And, that's a guy that can have that conversation because they've been through a lot of wars. I don't, know if a new coach could ever come in and do that, at least with this core. So, I'll let you kind of take the floor on Kerr and anything else, but I know those are some things you wanted to touch on when we talk like privately. So, I didn't want to leave that out and, for your listeners as well. So I'll drop my mic down so you guys can do your thing.
So I was just going to try to organize this real quick. I just have a couple more things. And then hopefully Dre and Monty, you guys can get into, some questions for Mike. Mike's time is short. So let's try to keep this as short and quick and efficient as possible. As for Steve Kerr, he's been a complete and utter disaster for this team. They have the highest payroll on this, in the league. And Steve, they're 19-25. All the close games that they could have won, they've lost. And this guy is making nonsensical decisions just like he did the game before against the Lakers when they needed to get a final stop up by 1 and double overtime. And you got Steve Kerr throwing out a defensive unit of Corey Joseph, Steph Curry, Potts, a 3-guard lineup with Kuminga at the 4 and Draymond at the 5. That is not a winning formula to win a game against the big Lakers team. You needed to put Trace out there, have him active defensively to get your best odds of winning that game. And Steve did not do these things. And so we're sick and tired of Steve Kerr. The fan base is most of the fan base at this point sees all the things that he's doing wrong. And the Warriors are not going to be able to, get over this hump. So we're just hoping that like he's going to command a big payday in the offseason. And I think the Warriors need to move off of him. But is there no sentiment around the league, Michael, as far as you hear in terms of like some rumors about Steve Kerr, like questionability, like what he did in FIBA competition, playing Josh Hart at the 5 to close the game, and you don't hear any of that stuff?
But I'm also, if I'm grinning or smiling at some of the comments you guys have are very funny on the side. I would say, I haven't heard anything on Steve not being back, at least yet. It's still very early for that conversation. But even when I talk with Anthony Slater on Hoops High Pod, we both kind of were of that mindset from what we've heard thus far. I would, as of today, we're talking like January 30th. There's almost like an anticipation. I think even Anthony Slater said that on the Hoops High podcast that Steve Kerr would be back. So, I'm going to just watch the comments flood on the right here. But yeah, that's kind of the sense that I have gotten and Anthony as well.
Okay. Last question for me, and then we'll get to Dre and Manu.
Okay.
Nicholas Claxton, you're obviously in the New York area, so hopefully you're tapped in a lot in regards to what's going on with the Knicks and Nets, but specifically for the Warriors, the Nets, because Nick Claxton, Royce O'Neal, Dorian Finney-Smith, these are some names of interest for the Warriors, especially Nick Claxton. Do you see any viability for the Warriors to be able to get a piece like that?
Just have to put my mic back on. No, I mean, by all accounts, the Nets want to keep Nick Claxton. I know he's going to be an unrestricted free agent, but they almost have to pay him at this point. And I've heard his range could be anywhere from 20 to 25 million a year. And so, that's just talking with executives, and it's all, projection now. Things could change, but I don't see Nick Claxton. As far as Dorian Finney-Smith, I've reported on him that, the Nets would like to get, ideally, if they're going to move him, the equivalent of 2 first-round picks. Now, you don't have to make it just 2 first-round picks. It could be a first and a rotation guy or something along those lines, if they're even going to move him. But, there's a lot of teams interested in Dorian Finney-Smith. He's a guy that can help a playoff team and a contender. The Lakers have been linked to him and a bunch of other teams. Dallas, Luka, that's one of his favorite players he ever played with. So he would love to have him back one day. There's a lot of teams interested, but I don't know if it's enough yet for Brooklyn to move the needle on him. And as far as Claxton goes, they've made it seem by all accounts, they're going to pay him. And that's not only a Brooklyn thing, that's also coming from, other teams that have poked around as well.
Oh man, we're getting a lot of just bad news, bro. Like this is not what we wanted to hear at all. We wanted to hear like engagement possibilities and any viable names that have come up at all for the Warriors, or no, not really.
I mean, I'm more curious who they can get for Wiggins. I don't see because I've always thought like Wiggins was a perfect fit for them, when his head was on and he wasn't dealing with some outside personal stuff. But yeah, it's funny. Like when they first signed Wiggins, everybody thought that contract was a steal. Now it's almost like the pendulum is swinging the other way. And I get it. He's had a down year, no question. There's no arguing there. But as far as the Warriors, I mean, I always wondered if like they could have made the run at Siakam, but it wasn't going to be. And I wondered that, Jim, because they have Kevon Looney, and Todd Ramasar represents both Looney and Siakam, but it never came to be. So I thought if they were going to get a big fish, maybe that would have been the guy they would have at least really poked around more on and tried to get. So they did poke around, but the price was going to be too high for them. So, I don't see a guy like Zach LaVine. I don't see a guy like DeJounte Murray fitting them, and those are two of the bigger names on the market now. So are there things around the edges maybe they can do? Maybe. Maybe try to fortify the bench. They're always a team that would be like a kind of a buyout destination, I think, if they have some guys that hit the market there. So I'm just looking at some of these comments.
Drake, go ahead.
I don't know about some of these trade proposals in the comments.
No, I just had a couple questions that someone I had a couple people DM me. Someone asked, are the Warriors going to be active on trades potentially involving Clay or Kuminga? That was the first question.
I don't see Kuminga going anywhere. I mean, teams have poked around a little bit, but I would say I think it's either a handful or handful's 5. At most, like 7 at most. But that's just like exploratory interest, just a call to see like. By the way, when a lot of times when reporters use that term, like exploratory interest, at minimum that usually means like, hey, they called, they wanted to gauge what the price was for a player, and they do have interest in the guy, they like the guy, but they're going to circle back later and see if they're willing to meet that price or kind of go back and forth.
Gotcha. Another question was about so what's the Warriors' main idea and purpose kind of this season? That kind of thing. Like sort of like what is driving their decision making going into the deadline?
As far as decision making to try for the deadline, it's more like if they can get an upgrade to help the team this season, they would certainly look to do it. But I don't think it's going to be at the expense of Kuminga, like I said, unless it's an all-star caliber guy. And I don't see that fit right now. And I still have yet to hear specifically who the players are that they can move for Wiggins on a 1-for-1 basis. I have heard that they've told other teams that they think they can, if they want, they can move Wiggins without having to attach a pick to almost, quote unquote, get off of his contract. But a lot of it is like kind of, I don't want to say hearsay because like Slater reported it and I trust Anthony, but the specifics I haven't heard yet. And, I'm more trying to figure that out. I see in the comments, like some people are asking me about All right. Whoever said Lowry for Wiggins, that's cap. Like Lowry marking for you, that's cap. But I do see some people are asking about Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward is an interesting name because Gordon Hayward's got talked about as a guy that Charlotte would move, but for what most people, Hayward can still play, but I don't know if you trade him Wiggins for Hayward, if that makes sense. I don't think that's really much of an upgrade. No offense. And people asking me about Chris Paul in the comments. Well, what about Chris Paul for Hayward? I mean, I haven't heard that, but I haven't heard it yet.
Can I also ask one more thing?
Go ahead.
What do you think the likelihood of like waiting to make a move in the off season rather than at the deadline? Like, do you feel like that's a real likelihood that they maybe just take a pause and just wait till the off season, and then they reevaluate, make a move then when things settle down and there's more clarity, or like is there like a more of a likelihood that happens than the deadline?
I mean, the only thing that changes in the offseason is two things. One, you got, for all teams, they're going to have more future draft picks that they can move down the line. So there's that. And two, the CBA rules change. So to me, I don't know. I don't know how much, like in the offseason, I think what's going to be interesting is if in the offseason, if they don't move Chris Paul now, do they have a bigger deal in mind in the offseason where he would have to like opt in and then get flipped? That's something I would keep an eye on if he's not traded by the deadline. Because on one hand, do they see a world where he can come back and be part of that second unit? Yeah, it's possible. I don't know if Chris Paul's going to want to do that yet, but they're keeping all their options open just in case, which also tells me that they still are tinkering around for things that they'd rather do on the trade market. They don't have what they want yet. So, because I truthfully believe if they did, they would have done it already. They know, and I think Jim touched on it with kind of Steph Curry and kind of his prime. Like Curry still played at a pretty high level, but the clock is ticking. Internally, they know that. So I wouldn't say they're acting lackadaisical. It's just there hasn't been a move that's making anything move the needle at this point yet. We'll see if that materializes over the next week or so. But I mean, they've had talks, they've called, they've done their due diligence, they've done what you would want them to do as an organization, at least to this point, from what I've heard. So we'll see coming up over the next week or so.
Manu, do you have some questions that you get off? Manu?
I think he's working around his mic, probably something like that.
Okay.
What about chat? Does chat have any other questions that we can find or look at?
Chat. In case you don't, I just put in Mike's Twitter handle, and in case you don't follow him, be sure to, every single one of you, go and follow him because he's a reliable, inside source. He's a friend of the show. He's a friend of mine, and it's an awesome follow. So be sure to go and follow him in case you're not.
Mike, you got a podcast, right? Hoops Hype, right?
Yeah. You get me on Hoops Hype at Mike A. Scotto.
Did you just start it?
Did I start what?
The podcast.
Nah, I mean, well, they always had their own podcast, but it's just like it's the Hoops Hype podcast with Michael Scotto now. I mean, I've done it, but I've done it more. We changed it up a little bit. Sometimes I've had like coaches on, I've had some execs, but like really what we've done now is like almost take it and make it like an Intel based podcast. Like when I had Slater on, I had James Ham on and we talked about the Sacramento Kings. I've had Bobby Marks on, who I've known for 13 plus years now. So like we talked about stuff around the league. But yeah, going forward, like, I have more players on and stuff too. I mean, I enjoy it, but you can follow me there. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Just type in Hoops Hype Podcast. It'll pop up. And outside of that, obviously hoopshype.com, my Twitter at Mike A. Scotto. I think on here you could see, my username is Mike A. Scotto. Not too hard. So as well, you can find me on Twitter, all my stuff. I have something up tomorrow in the morning. And, as far as the latest stuff I've heard out there, and that's about it.
Yeah, we'll be tuning into that. Manu, are you there? Are you?
Yep, I'm finally here. I think my
Okay.
laptop lagged a bit for a sec. Yeah. Hey, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us again. Really, really appreciate it.
Warriors news?
Yep.
You look just like Steph Curry, man.
I get that a lot.
What's on your mind?
Yeah, so as you know, we're 5 games under 500. Things look kind of bleak. Playoff push is really tough, and like we would need something good to happen for us to win, whether it's like a big run or a move or something like that. Like, do you believe that it's more likely that the Warriors bet on who they have like right now to try to make a run, like maybe wait for some of our guys to come back, like Chris Paul, Moses Moody, Gary Payton? Or is there like a possibility that the Warriors could still get some sort of like non-marginal piece, a piece that can kind of bolster their rotation? Like, is there any good reason to get our hopes up, I guess, to try to make some sort of playoff push?
Part of a champion. Like I always rock with Steph Curry. I'd never bet against that guy. I think they could certainly be a play-in team. Can they be a top 6 team? I think that's going to be a little tough, but we'll see. By the way, I've never seen this. So it says I'm on fire and enjoying my 30 seconds of glory. What is that, Jim? What is that in this playback?
So chat can, put fire emojis onto the people that are on stage. And if you get enough fires at the same time, and they can also ice you the way some of them are doing to me right now, both fire and ice. So ice is like if they're not liking what you're saying, if they're disagreeing with you, then they'll ice the shit out of you. So playback's is a cool platform, man. We do a lot on here. now I've fire.
I'm laughing, man. Everybody's just like, you're gonna be on ice so we can make a trade. It's like I don't make the trades. I'm just a messenger. Although I once in a while I throw my suggestions to certain teams, but sometimes I'll take them, sometimes I don't.
One more name. Actually, a couple of names.
Okay, go ahead.
One is John Collins with the Jazz. I know there was some reports about the Jazz not being happy with him, even though they've been playing much better with him lately. So that's the name. Wendell Carter Jr. is the name. I think Slater actually mentioned him.
But like Wendell Carter's on a really good contract, and if you're the Magic, I've had this conversation with people about Wendell Carter just around the league. Like, what's the incentive to move him? He's still young. He's on a good contract. If you're going to make a really substantial upgrade, then you do it. But otherwise, I don't see that. I really don't. Like Goga Batadze moved to the bench. Mo Wagner's not going anywhere. Franz's brother. Come on now. And he's a serviceable player. So what are you doing with that? To me, if anything, I look at Markelle Fultz on the Magic because of his expiring contract, and if they can maybe make an upgrade. I know they drafted Anthony Black. This is my opinion. Again, I think they should make somewhat of a run for DeJounte Murray, because right now we've seen the Magic kind of fall off in the East. But I think if they had more of a true point guard presence, they'd be a lot better of a team. You still got to, and even though Anthony Black has shown like a little bit of promise, he's a young guy. He's going to take time to develop. And he's more of a defensive guy than a shooter. They need shooters in Orlando. So, I mean, that to me is the bigger thing. But for the Warriors, I don't. Again, if they're reluctant to move Kuminga, which is what I've heard, that's arguably one of their best trade chips. So, are you going to, can they do something with Moses Moody? Can you do something with, I want to move Pods. He's a good player, I think. I won't move him personally. It's like, where are you making this big move? And a lot of the names you're kind of throwing at me, like Nick Claxton, it's like, well, the teams want to keep that guy. And then another thing is, like, then the Warriors got to pay him. What are you going to pay him? You going to pay a center $20-something million when they got Looney on the cheap relatively compared to others? I don't see that.
Well,
Not unless he's going to be an elite guy.
The Warriors fans are collectively tired of Looney. So they want if they can, they want to trade him too.
Yeah, I see it in the comments.
Yeah.
He's getting iced in these comments.
Mm-hmm. He's been problematic.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think it has more to do with Mike. Can you mute for a sec?
Yeah, sure.
So, I really, the problem with this team is a lack of connectivity to close games. And throughout the course of it, like Dario Saric is getting a bunch of minutes at the center spot. And these things are destroying the Warriors. They need to replace that. I think it sounds to me like they're looking to move off of Dario. And I don't know what piece is that the way you sound like. It just sounds so hopeless at this point. Like I will take even like a couple of marginal moves. Like if you told me the Warriors could get, let's say Otto Porter Jr. back or something for like Moody and Dario Saric, like I'd take that. You know what I'm saying?
Is Dario even a name that's?
I don't see them doing that for Moody. You can't take a kid in the first round like that and make him seemingly what was a part of their core, and you moving him for Otto Porter. Nah, I don't see them doing that.
Yeah,
you're saying about like Dario, that always heard like they like him. So I don't, and he's on a minimum contract. Like, if Dario gets included in something, that's different, but you're not making him the centerpiece of a package.
That makes sense. No, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. What about any other names that you've like players from other teams you've heard tied to the Warriors, like rumblings or like kind of sort of like in the back noise, like, oh, this player or that player, like sort of in the background? Any other names that we may not know of?
I mean, if they could, I haven't heard players tied to them, but if like they can upgrade over like Corey Joe, they would look to do that. Wiggins, they're gauging his value. It's stuff that's been out there, but there's no concrete like name that's tied to them. Like nobody is. Like the way like the Lakers have been tied to DeJounte Murray, nobody's going, oh yeah, the Warriors are getting player X. You didn't see it with Siakam. You don't see it with DeJounte. You don't see it with any like reserve. You don't even see it with like a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith. So
right.
I haven't heard anybody specifically with them. No. Yeah, I'm sorry. I see the comments. I know some want more, but.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense for sure. Chat, Jim, Manu, any other final thoughts or questions that you may want to run by before?
Well, this is more or less what I kind of thought was going on, which is like this front office is really incompetent, and like Michael just said, Kuminga could be seen as a huge asset that might have to be a part of the equation for the Warriors to get somebody back. But the question is, like, are they really making them? All you hear is like they don't really want to make Kuminga available, for example, right? And it's like, well, how serious are you about trying to win a championship this year? You have to give up something. Moody, Kuminga, whatever the case may be, you have to make somebody available for teams around the league to be like, oh, he's like super available. Let's try to get him with whatever we can get. If it's an all-star caliber player, we might be able to. We might be willing to move off of some guy that we have, if it means an opportunity to go get a guy like Kuminga or something like this. The Warriors are 19-25, and if you're not serious enough to be like, okay, well, because again, Shams literally reported that everybody outside of Steph is available, but then somebody starts playing well. Kuminga starts playing really well, and all of a sudden he's untouchable, and your team is going nowhere. So it's neither here nor there. This is deeply frustrating. There's no direction. You're not building for the future nor building for the right now by saying like, oh, well, we don't want to move off of this guy and that guy. And like, yeah, we're kind of like, we're not sure. You know what I'm saying? It's a show. There's no sense of urgency, and there's no sense of assuredness about this front office, that there's no trust there that they're going to be able to make the right moves, or that they're even looking to make a move that's serious enough to move the needle for the Warriors. And they have plenty of assets and they have plenty of pieces. They're just being stubborn about it, and they want to keep everybody, do everything the same way, and think that somehow just standing pat or whatever is gonna do what? Except have them not be in the play-in, which is where they are right now, 3 games away from the play-in. This is disgusting, man. I'm just I guess more than anything, I'm just disappointed that this organization is just so incompetent, and they're just riding the coattails of Steph Curry, and he cannot hide the things that are wrong with this organization anymore from top to bottom. Him alone, like, it's just, it cannot be done, and they need help. And it's like they don't have a basketball mind in there. It's very clear, just listening to, just all the insider information, what they sound like, what they're kind of doing. Like, okay, sure, do their due diligence, make some phone calls, but it's just like nothing sounds serious.
Because Jim, I know why. Because they haven't moved off the 2 timelines plan. The reason they're not serious, the reason they're not aggressive, the word you're looking for is aggressive. It doesn't sound like they're aggressive. The reason they're not aggressive is because they want to have their cake and eat it too. So they're stuck in between. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They don't want to move off the young guys, but they also don't want to move off the vet. I mean, they're trying to figure out some upgrades if they can, but they're not actually serious about it, because it's going to take some sacrifice to actually execute that and accomplish that. So, Lacob, I think they're doing their like jobs in terms of like taking those phone calls, but like, are they on the lines like just like trying to find players, trying to find upgrades, desperately trying to negotiate all that? No, I don't think they're doing all that, because they want to keep their young guys, which I understand from Lacob's standpoint, but it's a mistake because you're not, you're weakening the roster around Steph.
Okay, so yeah, we'll close this segment off with giving Michael the final word in regards to Michael, what do you think about, what is your opinion on what the Warriors need to be doing right now in order to salvage this time of this core? There's still a winning group in there somewhere. The league just cheated the Warriors out of a win, allowing the Lakers 27 more free throws, and the Warriors were still on, they were still about to win that game until Steve screwed it up in the final possession. So there's a winning group in there somewhere. They just need like some extra help. And the question is like, how do you feel about it, Michael? Like where do you see things ending up for the Warriors this season in terms of the deadline and where they're going to end up? And do you feel like they're doing the right things, or what do you think?
That's like a 3-part loaded question. I would say for the Warriors that right now it hinges on whether they can. I think some of it for the future hinges on whether they can move Wiggins or not, because the sample size with Draymond Green's been kind of small. But this whole can Kuminga play with Wiggins, analytics thing has been pretty negative, and it doesn't seem like they can. So ultimately, it almost comes to a point where it's looking like they're going to have to kind of pick between those two, I think, for the long term. And, I know Draymond has helped them play better, but ultimately, like, it seems like it's going in that direction. I'm not sure which way that's going to end up. I think they bring back Steve Kerr after the season. I think Klay Thompson returns after the season. And then as far as like what they do around that, it's trying to more like around the edges type of things for them. Because ultimately at this point, like I said, if they were going to make a swing, I thought maybe they would have went in on like a Siakam or something, but there wasn't anything close to that nature. So I don't think like DeJounte Murray to me, I don't know. I don't see how that would be a fit. Zach LaVine's making a lot of money. I don't think that's how they'd want to, spend their money there. So it's like you also got to have players available that are quote unquote star caliber guys that are a fit for them, and I don't know if that's there right now. So, that's the big picture stuff. Like I said, I do think Kerr comes back, Steve Kerr. I do think Klay Thompson returns. Am I missing anything there, Jim, as far as like big picture stuff?
No, I think that's pretty much it, man. I think this Warriors team, I said about a few days ago that I give up on this team, and I've never given up on this team mid-season. I've always believed in Steph Curry, and if you give him the right defensive pieces around him, that's always been a formula for success for the Warriors. And they're just missing too many defensive pieces, and you got Dario Saric in there playing the 5. Dario would be good if he just played the 4, but Steve Kerr refuses to put him at the 4, and he keeps putting him at the 5 and asking this guy who's a 0 on defense to anchor his team's defense. And then you wonder why the Warriors are 24th in defense. So, and then you go Chris Paul. Chris Paul comes back. They go tiny to close the game. You got 38-year-old Chris Paul, Steph Curry in the backcourt, Klay Thompson next to him, and with like Wiggins and Draymond, they're just too small. They don't have enough size. They don't have enough versatility. It's just looking hopeless, man. We'll see what happens at the deadline. The deadline is ultimately going to help us determine whether this season is truly done or not. A couple of pieces, I think it really will help a lot, even though the Steve Kerr tax, that is also just a very difficult thing to overcome, even if they do get trades. But then even just from that regard, looking for trades, the front office is just unserious. They're not definitively putting out names that they're going to be like, okay, yeah, we're totally willing to move off of this guy if it means we're going to bring back another piece that's going to help us propel us to a championship. So nothing good is going on with the Warriors right now, from a coaching standpoint, from a roster standpoint, from what the front office is doing standpoint. But on that note, we'll go over some matchup stuff for the game coming up tonight with the 76ers. I think Joel Embiid is questionable. Tyrese Maxey is out. So before we get there, Michael, thank you so much for being here, bro. Your time is much appreciated.
Oh, you're welcome. You got it, guys. My pleasure. Jim, I told you I'd carve out some time at some point. So good to chat with you as always, brother. Comments are hilarious. I've gotten a kick out of them, but nice to chat with all y'all and enjoy the night. Have fun. Watch the game tonight. I'll be writing for tomorrow. So.
All right, Mike.
Yes, sir. W Mike in chat. Appreciate you, Mike. Yes, sir.
And again,
Appreciate you,
everybody,
Mike.
don't forget
Thank
to
you
go
so
and
much.
follow Mike on Twitter in case you're not.